Hello, wonderful DHCs. So good to see you today. I wanted to make sure that I took some time, even though I can't be present during this call, to talk to you a little bit about map testing and especially map testing and mind print testing during the enrollment process for students coming up this year. Before you kind of let out any of those like, oh my God, testing's coming up. I want to remind you that most of you have done so much of this work already. Any students that you tested in the spring don't need to do any map testing. We're not doing twice a year testing. We're doing once a year testing for students that have been with us. And so those kids you won't be testing again until spring. But you do want to be considering kids that are new in enrollment, how you're going to be testing them before we start the fall school year. And then also just making plans for how you're going to be testing throughout the school year here. I know a couple of you have already reached out to me and you've seen in the Fast Five, I dropped last week the information around, and it's still in the Fast Five, the information around map testing and sort of the protocol and information about that. So do make sure that you take some time to take a look at that in the Fast Five. I do recommend that all campus teams get together and bring it up in their administration meetings because really every single member of the administration team has some role along the way here, particularly given that it kind of ties in with enrollment. And so really all of you need to be on the same page, and I'm bringing it up to you all as folks that I think could be a good advocate for this process along the way and for the things that you need along the way, because a lot of the burden of the enrollment testing does fall on you. So let's dive into it. I want to start off just again with a reminder of why we're doing this. Why do we do map and mind print testing? And one of the aspects of Fusion is our promise of making sure that we're working one-on-one with kids. And we want to make sure that we have information about them. We don't have those relationships that give us insight into how they learn and what they do and what they know and what they don't know that we would from long times of working with them. So enrollment testing is the most important part of our testing process, making sure that from day one, we have unique information for every child. We also want to make sure that we're using this information to inform correct course placement for kids, that we are not just necessarily looking at their transcripts, because as we all know, your grades in school don't necessarily recommend or reflect your academic abilities. And sometimes the opposite can happen as well. Students who were getting A's in their previous schools might not actually be kind of up to the level that you would expect given the courses that they've taken. And so map and mind print testing is going to give us that information. And then finally, and this is kind of perhaps a little bit more obvious, but it's that our teachers are taking this information and they're customizing and individualizing their courses, their planning for our students before they're even diving into the first unit material. So they aren't taking a stab in the dark. They have the information. They know where our students are at. So for us to be doing this, that means that we need to get these tests in before these kids start classes. We don't want any of this thing where like a month and a half in, we're like, oh man, I got to do map testing and I haven't had a kid doing it yet, because at that point, it's mostly lost its primary teeth. And so I do want to talk about our expectations here. And I don't think that these expectations have largely changed to Fusion. It's just that no one has really carried the banner in terms of what they should be. And so now I'm here to carry that banner. So the expectation is that all newly enrolling students are going to be tested in map and mind print. Ideally, these kids should be tested before they start their classes. Even more ideally, before they're even in the enrollment meeting. So it's when they're having those conversations with the head of school, they should come in and do their shadow days. And as part of those days, we could be doing this testing. Of course, some families need to hit the ground running. Some campuses are so desperate for hours that we don't really have a pathway. And so we recognize that that's the case. And so for families or students where it's not possible, the fifth session is going to be our kind of cutoff marker. You really want to make sure that in those first 2.5 weeks of classes, we do get this assessment information in so that teachers can make modifications, so that DSDs can make course changes if appropriate along the way. And so those are kind of our breakdowns there. If you're doing a really amazing job, you're getting this information before, not you DHCs, but you, the campus, the entire group is getting this information before you're even contracting with the DSD and the parents, and that can be a very difficult thing to do. So we also acknowledge that it's very good to have this information prior to classes starting. You can make any amendments along the way there. That works really well as well. And then worst case scenario, aiming to make sure that you have this information by that fifth session. I know I'm repeating myself, but the point it's just that important as to what our goals are here. Now you might be looking at me and saying, well, what about, our students? Does every kid need to do this? Of course not. We of course have exemptions. The same assessment waiver that was used last year is used this year. It's basically a piece of paper that says, hey, like, I, as a parent, am not interested in doing the testing for XYZ reasons. I acknowledge that I can do this again sometime in the future, and I acknowledge that it may require additional Friday mastery sessions or mastery classes because the teachers don't have this information up front. Parents need to sign these waivers. You need to have these on hand, or not on hand, but digitally stored somewhere so that you're able to kind of reference that information at any time. Parents can change their minds and, of course, do map and mind print testing if they want to along the way. We do recommend that, for students, particularly with school refusal, I think is the number one reason to not engage in testing, particularly at the beginning, or students that have very extreme test anxiety. Those are the cases that's fine. It is a parent choice at the end of the day, but we should be recommending that parents make sure that their students get this information. We should be touting these as valuable and important to basically students' academic success and the influence and impact of our teachers along the way. And at the end of the day, if a parent digs in their heels, they dig in their heels. We're not here to die on this hill. We're here to give their students the best education that we possibly can. Let's talk about accountability. Your campus will be hearing from me basically on a monthly basis, kind of similar but different to how the audit reports are done. My target that I'll be looking at for every campus is that 80% of your students are tested within those first 5 sessions. But like I said, really it's more ideal if they're being tested beforehand. And honestly, we should be getting every kid tested. There shouldn't be some kids that are not getting tested along the way. And of course, kids that are exempt, have those exemptions and so be it, they're exempt. In terms of roles on campus, the head of school really should be making sure that they're having this as part of their parent communication. They should not be hearing from the DHCs, or parents should not be hearing from the DHCs about map and mind print testing first. They should hear it from the head of school while they're talking to them during the intake process about things we do and how we individualize for their kids, that this is part of that process. DSDs, I think there's a wonderful opportunity for DSDs with their scheduling, particularly their initial scheduling, to register students or coordinate with the DHC to register students for testing, be it that you're doing it on campus or online, which I will talk about in a minute. That way we can avoid the issues that we were having in spring of some parents deciding to sign up their kids during classes, avoiding that entirely by basically making it so that the person who's doing scheduling on our campuses is in charge of, maybe not in charge of, but is facilitating the planning of that time there. And then you as the DHCs, you are the front line. You are the people that are in charge of the administration here. You're getting that information, you're organizing the information, and then of course you're following up with families. That is probably the most important and most difficult part of your jobs, is that follow-up. We see it time and time again. If you read the white paper on reflections of spring that I put out over the summer, campuses that followed up with their families time and time again are the ones who are most successful in terms of getting that testing completed. It is a lot of work, but just create a rhythm for yourself. And there are, in the document that I shared, some sample templates that you can use for those emails. ADs are, of course, kind of more involved in the back end. They're supposed to be sharing the information with teachers and staff, and they're still doing kind of training around that. But thinking about those things, I have seen ADs on a lot of campuses providing DHC support, and campuses that are many of the campuses that are really knocking it out of the park. Those two roles, DHC and AD, are really working in tandem with each other. If you find yourself underwater, this is a great person to go to connect with and get some help, because they're just as invested as you are in getting this completed. In fact, probably more as the primary user of this information. For online testing, I'm going to be offering it weekly on Tuesdays and Fridays. If you opened the document last week, you might have seen Wednesdays and Fridays, but I just changed that. So Tuesdays and Fridays, it does say that in the document if you open it now. Tuesdays and Fridays at 12 Eastern, and then trickling down your hours based on your time zone along the way, 9 in the morning for me. I will be doing online testing. Students are allowed to show up essentially for the first 90 minutes of that testing. So, they can show up anytime between 12 and 1:30, and I will take them in. You have to register your students online There's a Microsoft form that you're going to use that basically put in their input, put in the email of the person who I need to be communicating with afterwards, and it'll send it to me, and then I will test them. In this way, you'll know exactly who's registering when, so we can avoid that spring issue that we had of folks not knowing when students were registered for times, because you are registering them now instead of the parents. So it's that way you have more control, more ownership of it, which is helpful because, as in the spring, I won't be able to contact those families directly for you, but I will send you emails the day of the test saying this kid did not attend today, here's where they're at. I do recommend you go through with your campus team and read through that entire document. It's about 6 or 7 pages. It has registration details, communication loops, recommendations for both your admin team and for with parents. Talks more about that virtual testing, best practices on all campuses. Talks about using Friday mastery sessions or Friday school to do this testing. Also, something that's new, we did get the sign off from operations. If students have not tested by session 5, parents are just like not making the scheduling work. It's not going along the way. You actually are allowed to communicate with parents that if they basically have this one last chance, try to schedule with us in this way. And if they can't, we will be taking class time to do it. So you can use kind of essentially session 6 of that class to go and do testing for those students. So parents should have lots of opportunities for that not to be the case, but we can use that if needed to. Make sure you're very familiar with time that's needed for the exams. I find that one mistake that happens is folks can downplay how long that they take, and then students are very frustrated. For students with accommodations, I can assign accommodations online, but I would recommend instead that you test those kids on campus. They're going to really have a better experience if they actually have a proper need for accommodations. And then just making sure you're aware of who is in charge of what aspect of this process, because it is not just on you all. Just because you're the front line does not mean that you are carrying the entire flag the whole way. So coordinating with your admin team to do that is super important. And then finally, just working on that messaging component. I'm not worried about this with y'all, but making sure that we're celebrating kids. If it's part of the enrollment part of the enrollment process, making it maybe part of the enrollment package, that at the end, when they finish this testing, they get their goodie bag, or you just have treats, throw some Reese's Pieces at them when they finish, like whatever it is, make it fun when they finished, celebrate them for having done that. And then also just making sure that you're informing kids this is not a performative thing. This isn't going on a transcript. All this is information for your teachers to prepare for class. Expect that this test is going to be hard. Expect that this test is going to be easy. That's what it's doing. It's trying to figure out what you know, what you don't know. That's what we're here for. All right, well, thanks everybody for your time. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I will see you around. Message me on Teams anytime if you have a question. Thanks.